Happy New Year to you. So yeah, I got a question. So how long did this project take from like initial idea to conception? 'Cause I really like the idea. I've been looking at it thus far. It seems pretty cool. I can see a lot of people I know have attempted to do it and really complicated it, trying to like say, hey, let's put best practices in here. And I'm like, this is an evolving field. What are you talking about, best practices? And so I really like the approach that you guys took in doing this. So can you kind of share a little bit about, the process and what lessons you learned from it?
That is an excellent question. Thank you. So we started kind of in earnest working on this in the summer. And you have also brought up that this is a team effort. So I wasn't just kind of sitting in my office finding all of these citations myself. So I do have a research team here. There's another researcher that I work with and also an admin. And they both helped me to kind of work with this and did a lot of the heavy lifting of reviewing citations. And then our web team is who actually built the database. So they helped us to kind of make sure it was searchable and functional in the right ways, so that we were really able to kind of get people the information that they needed. But I would say your point about, people keep wanting to expand it. They're like, oh, does it cover this? Does it cover that? And it's like, no, we very intentionally decided we just wanted it to cover efficacy. And that was really an important piece of the questions that we were getting from faculty and just wanting to start there. And we didn't want to recreate the internet. I mean, I think that you can easily go onto other databases. You can find this stuff. We did a lot of Google Scholar. Google Scholar is convinced that we're robots at our IP address because we were doing so much searching there. I think that going narrow is better in some cases because people have very specific questions about this, and it allowed them to really zero in and kind of find the things that they needed. And I think if we were to do a different or another database, or if other people are thinking of doing it, I would try to make it as narrow as possible, like really answer one specific research question with the database so that you're not, like going out and doing all these other kinds of studies as well. But I will say an interesting thing about this has been since we launched the database, you would think that me and my colleague, Mary Ellen Delastrito, who helped to build it, you would think we were like the queens of research because we get emails about everything under the sun related to distance education research from people who found the database and they think we know all the research, like we're an encyclopedia of this research. So there is a need for, help to find the studies that will help people in really practical ways. So we're just kind of collecting those questions and answering them the best we can. But it's been fun to kind of see what people are interested in.
That's good. That's good. I think it was it's a really helpful it was a helpful idea. I have one more question. Did you guys ever talk about inclusive practices, like also including more inclusive practices? Was inclusion brought up in any subject areas or any conversations you guys were having?
So this is something that we talk about a lot at Oregon State campus just in general. It's part of the mission of what we do here. It's part of the mission of the research unit. Some of our previous research, for example, was on closed captioning and looking at, how different students are helped by these different tools, both students with disabilities and without disabilities. So we've done several different studies that are really kind of pushing us into these different directions. And in some ways, I know this is a slightly different answer than maybe what you were looking for, but I feel like with a lot of our studies, we're looking at kind of the question that other people assume an answer to, or, they're kind of assuming that we have the data to support something, but maybe we don't. So we try to find those gaps and really kind of poke at them to say, we're not convinced that, this is actually the answer, even though people keep talking about it as the answer. So I feel like, even though we're a research unit that studies online teaching and learning, obviously we believe that this is a good thing. When faculty keep raising this question, there's a reason. It's not just that they're, curmudgeonly. I think that, they're asking good questions and we want to follow up on that. So I think that one piece that's a more direct answer to your question is that we've included studies from all over the world. So we were very about kind of looking at international journals and making sure that we were including studies from different countries. And that's something that we might update in the future on the databases to make it searchable by country, but there wasn't enough of a range to kind of make that something we could do in phase one. but we are considering doing it in phase 2.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Cool. Great question, Katie. Don't go away, though. We have a follow-up question from Camille Andrews. Let's see. This is from Camille at Cornell. Hi. Perfectly. Welcome.
State has one.
That's a great question. So I love librarians. So to some level, they're always involved. Like I'm always engaging them as best we can. And there were also several studies that came out of the library world that are included in the database that have been very interesting to look at. For this particular project, in terms of kind of combing the literature and putting the database, the citation list together, they were not involved. But we do have a librarian here who's actually kind of dedicated to eCampus that I consult with frequently. And she's actually written for one of our edited collections that we're putting out this next year on high impact practices in online learning. So libraries are a huge partner. They just didn't happen to be a direct collaborator on this project.
Thanks.
I just found 3 articles in the database about the libraries, so that's fantastic.
Yes. And we're adding as we find them. So yeah, it's an interesting area.
Well, that's a question I want to come back to, but let me just remind everybody that you saw how easy it was to have Camille and Keith up on stage, so you can join us that easily just by clicking the raise hand button. And if you don't feel like it, if you're shy, we try to be welcoming, but if you can't, if your mic doesn't work, for example, if your bandwidth is low, just click on the question mark and you can bring in some more questions. Molly Knapp has such a question right this second, in fact. Let's see. Molly wants to know if you plan to mine other databases, such as ERIC from the U.S. Department of Education or PubMed from the NIH, to add your data set.
Great question. So when we were combing for citations, and I should be clear, this is a list of citations. So we're not like taking the data and doing a meta study. That is beyond what this project is. But we went through many other databases. So we started with kind of a Google Scholar search. We also went through and did several other database searches. We also looked at the bibliographies of all of the meta studies to make sure we weren't missing anything. We did look at the no significant difference database, but we found they were including some things that didn't kind of meet the criteria that we have. So there was a kind of a shift. You'll see that there are different numbers in terms of what's in their database and what's in ours. For example, we decided not to include anything pre-1998. We felt that a lot of the studies, and they go back to like 1926 or something. I mean, they're including kind of truly distance education. And we think, again, going back to our question of faculty skepticism and concern, they're not really interested in the courses that are using outdated technology because we're not using that technology anymore. They want to know about contemporary technology and what's working in the contemporary online classroom. So we decided to kind of do of the least, for example, television. And there were a lot of kind of television studies, and those aren't really included in the database. So we had to make some kind of judgment calls there in terms of what we thought would be of most interest to the audience.
It'd be interesting to have a kind of prehistory database or antecedents to digital learning. So to include correspondence classes, TV, radio.
Right. And I think no significant difference is a great starting point for that. I mean, they have a very comprehensive list of those kinds of courses and studies in their database. But one of the things we found that was kind of interesting, especially when we started looking around their cutoff point, which was like 2012, 2013, is there were fewer studies on blended. Like we found a lot on blended hybrid that were not in their database. So I'm not sure kind of what the search criteria were. And I know there's a book around it. Other hybrid blended people. And has just grown over time. And I see people kind of in the chat talking about how it is to agree with that. And I have a book on hybrid course design. So, I mean, I think that it's one of those areas that will only continue to grow, and we really wanted to reflect it in the database. So you can search the database by modality. You can search by hybrid blended, by fully online, and by more traditional to see which comparisons you're most interested in.
It's very, very rich. I wanted, again, friends, as you can see, there's a lot of conversation happening in chat. People are joining us on stage and throwing questions at us. I wanted to quickly ask you a question about the back end of this. But let me come back to that. Laurent, oh, please forgive me if it's Laurent. I'm sorry. Wants to join us on stage. His bandwidth might be a little low or slow, so let's give him a shot and we'll bring that up. But while we're trying to bring him up, let me just quickly ask you about the technology. What's the back end of this? Just Drupal or?
And that's something that if people are really interested in knowing, shoot me an email and I can connect you with our web team. We were definitely brought in for kind of the more functional conversations, like what do we need the database to do? What do we want it to look like? Those kinds of things. But in terms of everything else, it's the magic of our web team. So I'm happy to connect people if they're really kind of interested in learning more about the back end.
That's a great example of this being a team project. Thank you.
Yes, it absolutely is.
Laurent, can you hear us? Okay. Oh, yes. Oh, we just lost him. Shoot. No, bandwidth is a challenge. Laurent, if you want to just share your question via text, please type it in and I'll bring it up. There we go. I checked the database of the word leadership. Only one article. My question. Out of those 200 articles, how many would you say relate to soft skills as compared to technical ones? Good question.
That's a really good question. And I would imagine that it is really dependent on the discipline and also the specific courses that are being studied. So we didn't do kind of a comprehensive breakdown of the skills that are being measured in each course.
I have hope that perhaps we can get to a point where technology starts to provide us with some speed advantages in being able to pull off some of these studies while maintaining rigor. But I haven't seen that done yet. I don't know if you have, but I like this design-based research. I hadn't heard of it referred to in those terms before, but we do that all the time. It's a very iterative process. So,
yes.
But I'll sign off and let somebody else onto the stage. Thanks. That was a great answer, by the way.
Thanks for your question.
Great question. Speaking of great questions, we have a text question coming up from Alan Heaps, who wants to know, how would you hope that an online course and program support services at other institutions would use the efficacy database with their own faculty?
Great question. So one of the things we're hoping is just that people will know that it exists and that we've created this as a tool for people to start exploring and especially for people who are feeling very skeptical. I mean, this is for them, but it's also for faculty researchers who want to know where they can make a contribution through scholarship of teaching and learning. So I see it as working on kind of both ends of that spectrum, faculty who are not ready to take the leap, but also faculty who have taken the leap and they want to contribute back and they think that maybe an efficacy study might be a way of doing that. And as I work with faculty here through our fellows program, it's a common first direction for our faculty fellows to go is, can I compare a face-to-face in an online course? Like, can I do the efficacy work? Because they still feel like it needs to be done. So I think that it's definitely a tool for researchers. And as somebody already mentioned, people who want to do like a synthesis of the literature or to pull together what's going on in a particular discipline or a disciplinary publication or newsletter or something like that would certainly be able to pull from the database for that.
Thank you for that rich answer. That's a very, very clear question. We have another question coming from video, and the rest of you can see it's really easy to ask questions. We're really glad to hear from you. Our chat box is just bubbling over with a lot of different questions right now. But now we've got Jeremiah. Hi.
Hi, Brian. Hello.
Good to see you.
Given that I'm situated in an institution that is looking into MicroMasters and credit equivalency for MOOC-like experiences, so I looked in the database for literature on MOOCs, and I checked the inclusion criteria too. I didn't surface any studies about MOOCs, and I was wondering if that's because there hasn't been a modal comparison in the literature to date, or if it didn't, if it's not explicitly part of the inclusion criteria.
That's a really good question. So yeah, we are not excluding studies on MOOCs. So if you didn't find it, it makes me wonder if it's not getting picked up as a keyword. So I can certainly check into that and kind of see what's there. I think sometimes also, not to be kind of too negative toward our researcher friends and colleagues, but sometimes they'll use language and titles of studies that include it, so they might not use the word MOOC. I mean, if you're trying to search for it. So I would try to search for the full massive open online course to see, if that picks up anything. But sometimes I think the modality comparisons of a MOOC versus some other kind of modality is incredibly challenging, just because of the size differences, and people do not see them as equivalent in terms of what's being covered in the course, and also in particular the pedagogies of what's happening in that course. But let me take a look, and feel free to shoot me an email on the side to remind me and to connect with me so that I can talk with you about that. Because now you've got me curious about, and I don't remember. I mean, there's a lot of studies floating around in my brain, so I don't off the top of my head remember, but I want to go in and look now and kind of see what's going on there.
Thank you.
And just one thing to think about is the MOOC hype bubble crashed in the U.S., but there's a lot of MOOC publication, a lot of MOOC creativity happening in Europe and Asia. So you might be more likely to find scholarship from other countries.
Well, the other thing, I mean, we do include international studies, but when I think about the MOOC literature I've looked at, a lot of it has to do with how do you do it? How do you do it effectively? It's not even comparing it. It's like, how do you make it work? I've seen a lot of studies some studies on academic labor and some of the concerns around academic labor in MOOCs. How do you keep people in the course because it's such a difficult retention platform? So I've seen a lot about MOOCs, but not necessarily on efficacy that is related to other modalities. There's efficacy studies of MOOCs by themselves, but we wouldn't include that if there wasn't a comparison in the database. So the literature is very rich, but I'm not seeing it kind of from the angle of the database that would cover.
Great.
Thank you. And for the answer. There's been a lot of Twitter traffic, Katie, but my favorite one I thought you would like was from the Lake Hall, which says in all caps, "Searchable by discipline!" Exclamation point, exclamation point. So
yes,
you have fans.
That was incredibly important to us. Yes. We get that question all the time. Well, and I think anyone here who's listening, who, works with faculty, is an instructional designer, is a distance ed administrator, you have heard the question, what about in my discipline? I mean, it is just everywhere. Yeah. So it was important for us.
It's the structure of faculty lives. It's crucial for that. Well, I had a couple more questions. And again, friends, we're running out of time. So this is your last opportunity to ask Katie a question here on the forum. One is about the technology itself. Have you looked into any possibility of having social networking or community links around it? Or is it right now just the database by itself?
In terms of sharing out specific citations, like citation by citation, to like tweet out a citation or something like that? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Oh, sure. Well, there could be that. There could be the chance to have a community around it, such as to have people share favorite citations or favorite searches, or to have a way to, for example, have it track your own. So that you can have a user profile, so you can basically get them, people who search, or turn it the other way, people who search for this also search for that kind of thing.
Right, and just start to connect people around it. I think that's an excellent idea. We haven't done it in a concerted way. What we do have right now is the option to sign up for the email. So we're kind of building some community around that, just in terms of knowing who's interested. And it's helping us to also connect with some other researchers who've had direct questions about the database. And then there are ways on the website to share it out on social media. And we are absolutely encouraging people to link to it from their institutional web pages. So right now our focus is really on just telling people it exists and doing a little bit of a campaign around that. And trying to just make sure people are aware of it. And that's what we've been focused on for the last couple of months. And as we go to conferences in early and throughout 2018, that's part of our focus as well. So we'll have a poster at ELI coming up. So if anybody's going to be at ELI, come find me. I would love to chat with you more. And just starting to kind of create, we have little postcards and, little things that we've been putting together to help people find the database. But I love the idea of building community around it. And a big mission of what we do here in the research unit with our fellows program and with our podcast in particular is building a researcher community. So we're always looking for avenues for that.
You're still located in your university, so you have to serve them primarily.
Well, I mean, it's part of our mission, but at the same time with this database project, we knew it would be of interest to people outside of OSU. So, I mean, this was something that we want to serve the field. And a lot of the work that we do, the books that we publish, we have 2 edited collections coming out in 2018. Those are contributions to the field. You know, like that's not just internal here on the campus. So our fellows program is internal, but a lot of the work that we do actually goes quite a bit beyond, you know, Oregon State and into kind of international colleagues and trying to make sure that everyone in the field is kind of getting their questions answered. The bigger challenge is that there's too many questions. You know, like we're constantly trying to keep up, and there's just no way to answer, you know, all the questions that we have about online teaching and learning. So we're making the best contributions we can with the staff and the resources that we have.
It'd be interesting to see if you could aggregate all those questions over a year, say, and just see what they tell us about things. But before I pursue that, Camille from Cornell wanted to ask another question. Let's see if she wants to join us on stage, or just we have the text question. Not a question, but MOOC or massively open online coursework uses keywords. Also, this is where databases like ERIC are useful in identifying a range of subject headings. Quite true, quite true. Have you thought about creating an ontology or a keyword list for the database?
I think that's a great option for phase 2. With phase 1, we were getting the basics done, really wanting to make sure we hit the key metrics of being searchable by discipline. One of the things we're also looking for, and I think this is something Camille is raising now too, is making it so that you can import the citations from the database into a citation management system. I'm not sure that that functionality made it into phase 1, but it's something that we know is really important for people, or just to have, you know, like a CSV file or something that they can take if they're using it for research purposes. So, and I mean, all this stuff is publicly available. I mean, the database is open to everyone, but we want to make sure that it's useful to people in the ways that they want to use it.
Are you looking at, I should rephrase that, what's your approach towards open access and scholarly publication? I mean, are you aiming to include both articles and monographs that are proprietary and only accessible through a database, or are you also trying to include open content?
So that is not an inclusion or an exclusion criteria for us. I mean, like we looked at everything. So as long as there was an outcome that was measured, it didn't really matter where it was coming from. Now you can search the database by peer review. So there are some things in there that are not peer review. And we did have sorry?
Nice, you have that as a toggle on the left menu.
Yes, yeah, I mean, we knew that it would be of interest to some people. And there are some things in the database that we really struggled with, things like conference publications, because sometimes it was really difficult to track them down. So there were certain things we just had to decide not to put in because we couldn't find them to like really get a definitive sense of what the outcomes were from the study. But we do have a whole other arm here of Oregon State eCampus called Open Oregon State, which focuses on OER resources, open textbooks, and it's a huge part of our mission as well to help students in particular to save money on those resources. So a lot of our studies are research reports that we put out. Sometimes we don't go through traditional kind of academic publishing platforms. Our last 2 major national studies were reports that were released on our website. So we do kind of a range of things. Certainly there's the credibility and the currency of peer review, and sometimes those things are behind a paywall. But we're pretty committed to a diverse range of dissemination methods so that other people are really having access to what they need. So our podcast is OER and this database is OER. We want it open to everybody.
Excellent, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. And friends, this has been a theme for the forum for the past 2 years. Has been a dynamic or the challenge of open education, open access to scholarly publication. We're almost at a time, and I wanted to ask you a bit more about phase 2, if I could. Are you looking into partnering with other organizations or entities? Are you looking at reaching out for support from, say, foundations to really expand this even further? Or what does phase 2 look like, if I could ask?
That's a really good question. And we kind of have paused a little bit in terms of development, other than just making sure we're keeping up with updating the database. That's kind of our current job right now. Our 2018 pipeline of studies has begun, and it is certainly competing for our time in terms of the work that we're doing to do original research out of the research unit. So for now, what we're committing to is updating the database on that monthly basis and making sure that we're keeping it current, which I think is our #1 priority. We don't want to see it languish. We don't want to see, people coming and not finding what they need. And we've also asked people to help us to update the database. So if you see something that's not in there that you think should be in there, email us. Let us know about the resources you're finding that you want to include. But there's definitely some different search functionality. I've mentioned a couple of things throughout today's discussion about searching by country or some other kinds of variables that we might want to break down the studies with at some point. But we tried to break it down as much as we could. So you can search by undergrad, grad, the sample size, the discipline, the journal, all the things that we thought would be kind of really primary for people we put into phase 1 and tried to push really hard to make sure those things were included. So I would open it up too to the people who are going to the database. Tell us what you want in phase 2 and we'll do the best we can. I don't see us expanding the topic. I think that, keeping it on efficacy is pretty important to us. But in terms of features and things like that, we definitely want to hear what people are interested in.
Well, that's a nice project management approach. You expand, but you're still keeping this scoped in a pretty rational and sane way.
That's the goal. Rationale.
Well, that's terrific. And are you, what kind of feedback are you getting besides the MASH notes on Twitter and some of the fans like myself? What other feedback are you getting from this?
So far, we've had really positive feedback, especially on social media. A lot of people sharing out the database with colleagues and saying, this is what they've been looking for. So that's exciting because we did feel like we were going to fill a gap, and I think we have. And we've heard from a huge range of people as well: faculty, instructional designers, distance education administrators, a lot of different people who are using it. So that's exciting. I did getting a ton of emails asking us totally random questions about all aspects of online learning research. And those come in pretty frequently. And we'll get a question, for example, like, just have you seen anything on this particular topic that's completely unrelated to the database? So it's allowing us to kind of be a source of information for people, which is good, and to just make connections with other researchers and to hear about the kinds of projects that people are working on that drew them to the database initially. We're constantly working on expanding our network of researchers in distance education. So it's been a nice way of just letting people know that we're kind of actively working on these problems and helping us to expand that network.
Well, expansion is the rule. I hate to wrap this up, but we're at the end of the hour. Katie, thank you so much for being so generous with your time, for answering so many questions. This is a very, very exciting project, and I'm delighted to connect with it.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thanks to everyone who was here and who asked questions and who participated in the incredibly active chat. It was really fun to see what people were talking about. So this was really fun. Thanks.
That's the Future Transform, fantastic people. And we have a statement from Alan Heaps at the end. Thank you to Katie and her staff for putting the database together. It will be a valuable resource for us. Also, thank you for presenting and fielding questions today. Indeed.
You're welcome.
Thank you again. Let me direct everybody towards the next week, the next couple of sessions. Just as we bring up these slides, let me just say, it's fascinating to see this project. It was launched just a couple of months ago in November. And already it's unique. It has a couple of hundred items. It's growing more and more. I'm really privileged, I think, very delighted to have been in at the ground floor of this taking off. Now, next week, we're going to return to a classic Future Transform theme, which is the future of libraries. And we're really, really lucky to have Lisa Hinchliffe. If you don't know Lisa, she's one of the giants in the field of information literacy and digital literacy, major, major player in the library world. I mean, her biographical details, her background just go on and on. She's a fantastic person, a dynamo of energy, and very, very, very thoughtful. We'll be talking about the future of libraries next week, so please join us for that. And in the meantime, you can also try to figure out what we're going to be reading next. a couple days ago, launched a poll for our book club's next book, and already we have more than 104 responses. So it's a fascinating list. Now is your chance to chime in and vote a couple of times. Chicago School, right? Vote early, vote often, and pick the next title for us to read. Now, beyond that, if you'd like to learn more about the forum, or if you want to learn more about FTTE, go to ftte.us. If you want to learn more about this technology, go to shingley.com. And let me thank you all very much for your time. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.